This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Angela Kelly Smith for the first time. Thank you for being on our show. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
We are, if you can see the little icon on the top, we're on Newsly. That we're a featured podcast on Newsly, the Phantom Electric Ghost Show. So you can check us out within an hour. We'll be on that platform. If you use coupon code GHOST, you can get 1 month free premium subscription so you can stop scrolling and start listening to your favorite news articles and podcasts. Again, we're a featured podcast on Newsly. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be great.
So, like, you are a podcast in multiple areas. Person, you're the host of the podcast Launchpad. You're the co-host of the Geek Girl Soup podcast, founder of the Women Podcasters Academy, and you're author of the Amazon bestseller, the Podcast Launch Playbook. So that's
Yeah.
really focused on podcasting.
All things
So how did you?
podcasting.
When did you get that focus? When did you start in podcasting?
I started in podcasting in 2012, January 2012, as a co-host with Geek Girl Soup. A couple of buddies started that
Mhm.
one like 2 months earlier, invited me to do an episode on video games. I was playing Skyrim at the time, really into Skyrim. I played a few other video games, but that was my big one then. I'm like, sure. I had never listened to a podcast before, but I love public speaking. I was in coaching at that point. I had done teleclasses. This is before webinars. People would actually get on the phone and listen to a
Mhm.
teleclass for an hour. It was wild. And the podcasting bug bit me, and they kept me on as a regular co host. So I've been doing that for 11 years. And I did my own interview based live podcast at Blog Talk Radio for about a year. And yes, stop that. That was 2012, 13. I'm still with Geek Girl Soup, and then started a business one called Marketing Chat Podcast. I'm phasing that one out. It still has a few more to go. And then Podcast Launchpad is to help mostly women entrepreneurs use podcasting as a marketing tool for their business. And that's my focus. That's what I help people do.
That's really interesting because I fell into podcasting in 2016. I'm a musician. I'm on SoundCloud, and this guy named Rock Tunes out of New York City sent me this email and said, "Hey, I like all your music on SoundCloud. Let's do an interview." We jibed together so good. We did a podcast for like 6 months where we just talked about
Wow.
music. It was just, and then from there, I said, "Well, why don't I go and take all these musicians on Instagram and do a behind the music type of interview with them, audio?" And that was back on a tool called back in the day called Spearmint before
Mm,
Anchor. And then I
yeah.
did that, and then moved to Anchor, and then moved to StreamYard, and then I do some other stuff with like a bunch of other platforms. But it just opened up this my world as a musician. And people say, "Well, why would you do that if you're a musician and producer? Why are you taking time away from your production work?" I said, "Well, because it actually is better than paying for bots." Because people found out that who's this ghost guy, and then I get people traffic into my music. So I have,
Yeah.
it's kind of like just because I do this, I work with other people, and I bring attention to other topics to people outside of me, and it brings attention to my lane, which is interesting. And I get work. Like I end up getting a lot of leads working on projects. So I end up working with other producers. I end up writing music with. I'm working on with a Japanese producer and a couple other producers. So that's how I got into it. And they wouldn't say, "Well, why doesn't it doesn't make sense?" But like it does make sense.
Totally.
But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it sounds like you got into it for fun and passion, but podcasting really is great, like as a lead magnet, if you will. Like, I mean, totally getting your
Yeah.
name out there, being known for this area of expertise. And it's really a great marketing tool, like no matter what business you're in. And, so at Geek Girl Soup, that is totally for fun. That is a hobby. We talk about movies, TV shows, and diversity,
Mhm.
equity, and inclusion in the film and TV industry. And we just love it. That is for fun. And then my other ones are part of my
Business.
business. They are marketing tools for my business, but I love them. They are fun. They are not a chore. Like for me, social media feels like a chore. I do not love doing that, but I do it, to promote my podcast and to get my name out there. But I have found it much more effective to get my name out there with my podcast.
Yeah, because a lot of musicians, I mean, they moved into TikTok and Reels and Shorts, and I have taken my podcast and then done clips. I
Yes.
do video clips like 30 to 90 seconds, and some plays like 3 minutes to 5 minutes, depending on
Hmm.
what you can do.
Yeah.
And I found that that type of use of social media actually works for at
Hmm.
least for what I'm trying to do. And social media is hard because you got to always be engaged. But the thing about being a musician, we have lots of music, and the
Yes.
cool thing about TikTok and Reels is where a record company might say, hold this for 6 months, and you got to do this and do that, go through A&R. You can just go on TikTok and put up demos all day, and it
True.
actually works. And
Yeah.
so, being a musician, that actually gives us a place to put all this material that we didn't know where to put it, and now we can put it, and we can keep an engagement with an audience. And I think that's what's cool about a podcast, though, is that you get that longer form in a world where people only want to spend 15 seconds on something or
Right.
20 seconds on something. It's cool to be in a form that goes 30 minutes to an hour, and
Absolutely.
it's like radio. I think why
Yeah.
do people still listen to radio?
Yeah. And people do listen to the whole
Did you
podcast.
find it like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
people, no matter how long, I mean, okay, the most popular length for a podcast is like 20 to 40 minutes. But even when they're an hour, 80% of podcast listeners listen to 80% or more of the whole episode. So basically, they're listening to the whole episode. And they're not doing that with a blog. They're scanning a blog for just a few seconds. And even with videos, they tend to fast forward through them. So
Mhm.
they are absorbing or they're paying attention to a podcast, even though they're listening while driving or while doing household chores or walking the dog. But they don't have to be tethered to their screen. And they love that. So they put it on, they're driving, they're cooking, cleaning, and we're in their ear. We've got them, we've got their attention. And I love that. And it's similar to like when they put your music on, they put on iTunes or Apple Music now. I guess they don't really call it iTunes anymore, or Spotify.
Yeah.
And they're listening while they're doing something else, but it's there. We're in their heads, we're in their ears. And you got
Yeah,
to
it's
love
interesting.
that. Yeah.
Well, the engagement on podcasts is so interesting because as a musician, I can see my royalties on my music.
Hmm.
And music is notorious. Our royalty rates are like very bad.
Yeah.
My podcast rates are so much bigger
Hmm.
than my music rates is part of the reason why I'm podcasting. But like you could have like thousands and thousands of plays, tens of thousands, 100,000 plays, a million plays, and the rate is smaller than the rate for a podcast. And
Yeah.
so it's because the video realm is like a real rate is higher than a music rate.
Mm.
A TikTok rate is higher than a music rate. Music, since like Napster has been devalued.
Yeah.
You don't make the money as a musician. You have to tour, you have to do merch, you have to sell shirts,
Right.
you have to do everything other than your music.
Yeah.
Unless you get it licensed. And so
Right.
podcasting became another way for musicians to kind of get out here
Mhm.
and talk. And we initially like got deep dives into music production, kind of like a geek type of producer oriented show. And then
Oh,
we
wow.
started, talking to a lot of emerging and independent bands and focusing on female singer songwriters, which
Mm.
nobody had really been the main focus. And that's what I did for many years. And I still do it. But it is interesting that people are willing to listen to a podcast longer than a song. The average length
Yeah.
people will listen to a song in like 30 seconds,
Yeah.
or they bounce around, they're on playlists, they won't listen to albums as much. But
True.
podcasters, like listen, people will actually going through the whole hour. So it's a really good opportunity, I think, for marketing, and that's why
Yes.
I actually have sponsors and I have, pitches that I'll run because the companies are like, wow, these, like, even if you're a small podcaster, you can get engagement from some companies that want to reach an authentic audience and figure like this is an authentic person that's
Mm-hmm.
actually doing something they love. And so they like this like micro level influencer seems to be
Absolutely.
like a lot of businesses seem to. Do you find the same thing that they're getting into that's what you're kind of pitching to your audience too?
Absolutely. And another way to make money through your podcast without going the ads or sponsor route is to get partners. And so, how that works a little bit differently from a sponsorship is you can do it shorter term, even for like just, let's say, like 3 months, 6 months. You can do it for a year. They don't take over any creative control like some sponsors do. Not all sponsors do. And they may pay you outright, or you may get their product or service for free during that time. So it's a really nice trade off. But again, no creative control, no telling you what you can and can't do with your show. And
Mhm.
you get either money for a set amount of time, you put that in the agreement, or their product or service for free during that amount of time. So it's a really cool
Yeah, we've
way
been
to do it.
we've been able, as a musician, like this mic we have, we got
Mm,
we got that because they
yeah.
basically wanted us to use it on the podcast, and we did, and we still do.
Yep. And it's nice
But
and visible.
but being a musician, we just started to repurpose a lot of our
Yeah,
equipment, and it's like,
yeah.
well, this works because we've got cameras and we've got mics and we've got mixers, and it's like, let's use that to increase the quality of what we already do for our main thing is like writing music. But it has been an adventure because we had to diversify. Like we didn't go as narrow. We have actually gone more wide. I've
Mhm.
had shamans, authors, CEOs. I've had Grammy nominated producers.
Mm.
I've had actors, all different types of people. I mean, I've started talking to psychotherapists
Mm,
and different types of people I never thought I was going to talk to. Because my
yeah.
focus, I'm a musician, I'm a producer, but then I started to find like in this whole thing with a lot of people who are, I guess they're like life coaches
Mhm.
and mentors, and I started to point out like John Paul, George, and Ringo are kind of like influencers or
Right.
life coaches. They inspired millions of people to get
Yeah.
into music. So the idea that a musician can kind of have that conversation about like you could see him as a shaman, you could see him as a life coach, you can see him as a
Mhm.
mentor. They inspire whole movements.
Yeah.
With Dylan, with his like work he did in the 60s inspired like the whole civil rights movement. So there's a lot of convergence if you are open to it, like if you can see
Mhm.
where things cross. So I've always had a strategy to see where art crosses into business and business crosses into art, and that's how I've tried to survive in this ever changing world. I've decided to be more expansive. But I think maybe you can talk about how you can pick a tight niche.
Yeah, so in podcasting and in business, but yeah, I do recommend picking as tight a niche as possible because it's easier for your podcast to get found. It's easier than to rank doesn't matter. I mean, we shouldn't pay attention to, I mean, though we do, we all check our rank, but we really just need to not worry about that. But niche does help. It helps with getting more followers, more listeners, more downloads, and on and on and on. And we want people to listen to our podcast. And so the tighter the niche, the easier it is to be found, because when people go looking in an app, a podcast app, or even on Google, they are looking up very specific things, especially on Google. And Google is a big way for people to find podcasts now. So, in Google, they're typing in very specific questions. They tend not to type in just a couple words, they'll write in a whole question. And podcast episodes have the potential of coming up in those answers. especially when those keywords are in the podcast name or in the episode names. And in the podcast apps, when your podcast name has keywords, then those start to come up. Now in your case, your name is very, very cool, even though it doesn't describe what the podcast is about. So that's an exception. You've got a
Yeah.
cool name and it doesn't tell what
That's
it's
the name
about.
of the band. Yeah, it's
Right.
the name of the band. So, I mean, what we tried to do is just keep the name consistent between we didn't change it
Right.
because we wanted to we have a method to our madness. Is like,
Yeah.
people find us as a podcast and they find us as a musician. So we get people who say, "Oh, he's a musician." Then they go check out our music, check out our
Yes.
records, check out our production stuff. So it's kind of like that was the whole point at the
Yeah.
beginning. Now
And
that
that
might
makes
be a
sense.
detriment. It might be a detriment because I'm not that specific, but in the titles, I'm starting to open up. Like, okay, when I talk to authors, I'll say author. If I talk to
Yeah.
a CEO, I'll say CEO. Talk
Mhm.
to a shaman, I'll say that.
Yeah.
And then, and it's
Yeah.
cool. Like tools like Podmatch give you like recommended titles or what people want. So when you
Yeah.
see a guest, you can see what they want to push. And I've
Mhm.
always liked to do background. When I go to check somebody out, I'll listen to their record, I'll look at their website, or look at what they're doing, so I
Yeah.
can have an effective conversation. So, like when you started in audio,
Mhm.
when for you did it shift to video?
A few months in with the Marketing Chat podcast. At first, I was just doing audio, and I was then doing an interview, and of course, I was just doing Zoom then, and so the quality isn't great. But this one, so I was not camera ready for that interview. I was just wearing a house sweater. So in other words, a sweater I never wear outside the house. I had no makeup on. I should have been I don't know why. I don't know why I was dressed like that. Like that looked disrespectful for the person I was interviewing. That was rude. But anyway, that's how I was dressed. But the energy of the interview was so good. He looked so great. His background was awesome. My background was fine. It wasn't in here, it was in a different location. And I was like, I have to share the video of this. I don't care how I look. It was just so good, the energy and everything.
The content was good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So from that moment on, I was camera ready. I got a ring light and a better camera and like, yeah, gonna do this right. So shared video of everything, started recording my solo episodes with video because I do share the whole thing on YouTube, but then also making video clips out of them to share on social media is
Hmm.
fantastic. People like video.
Yeah, I've been doing getting a lot of good response from Facebook Reels and Instagram Reels. Where
Yeah.
I'll do a cut of like a really good section of the interview and then push it to those platforms.
Yeah.
And that has been very helpful in pushing my Facebook numbers up. And sometimes we get like 400% increase,
Ugh,
600% increase. Get these crazy numbers, and it really it's interesting because then it becomes monetized. Like I didn't even realize they were going to pay me, and then my Facebook got monetized, and my Instagram got monetized, and
wow.
so I got the ability to get subscriptions on Instagram. So
Mm,
the podcast is generating all kinds of income streams from like the fact that you can get monetized on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and
true.
TikTok and all these places. They'll
Yep.
start paying you. And then you
Yep.
get all this side income and you're just doing something that I initially was just doing because it's a hobby.
Yeah.
Was just something that was fun. I just like to chat.
Yep.
And
And then all because
I
you
would,
just turned on the camera, a nice
yeah,
camera with a
yeah,
light.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was just moving from audio to video was a big move. I mean, not my
Yes.
numbers up significantly, and I'm
Yep.
like, wow. And even though this gets transferred, I mean, it gets translated so it'll be on Apple, which is
Right.
not video, and you
Right.
still
Because
get a lot of numbers from the people who do only audio. There's some
right.
people that don't want video, but
Right, and that is key. Podcasts are audio, and the podcast audience wants audio. So they don't really wanna hear about, "Oh, look at this. See what I'm doing in this
Mm.
podcast? Look at me." No,
Yeah.
you'll turn off your audio audience doing that, especially, like, too much. Occasionally, it's okay, but on a regular basis, no, you want it focused on the audio. And, like, new podcasters who don't wanna do video, totally fine, totally fine. You're missing out with video, but podcasts are audio, and we have to put the audio listeners first.
Yeah, it's been really cool because of the musician focus. When we show somebody something, a music video, it's mostly they still get the audio. So
Yes,
they miss the video. So the video person gets to see the visual,
right.
but the person's watching it, but they can still get the vibe of it because it's audio. So
Absolutely.
that's always been really cool that
Yeah,
we've been able to continue that and to just, be able to push the art part of what we do is
yeah,
like how music and art and video all starts to collide. And we talk to cover artists and stuff and talk to people like we were talking to authors about their choices for, book covers. And then when
mhm,
you're talking about it, that's fine. You can get the description for the conversation, but then you actually see the author show the cover of the book.
yes,
And that was useful. The fact that you
yep,
have that for one set of audience, they don't really have to have it, but you can
right,
describe it. But I think it's really interesting how this is a tool like email marketing and cold calling. It seems like podcasting is opening up for a lot of businesses. I see a lot of businesses like CEOs and entrepreneurs who are just kicking off like a startup.
yeah,
They want to talk to influencers. They want to get into certain audiences to pitch their services or their products. And it seems
yeah,
like the podcast is like to me is like the infomercial.
yeah,
It seems to be kind of like that, and maybe it has
right,
more people maybe turn off the infomercial on their cable, but maybe they
yes.
don't turn it off on YouTube.
Right, right. Well, because the podcast shouldn't be like you're right. It is like an infomercial, but you don't want it to feel like one because people will turn off an infomercial podcast, but they're not gonna turn it off when we're providing real value and when the audience
Mhm,
gets to know us. And in that sense, it absolutely shortens the sales cycle because once people listen to the podcast enough, they get the valuable, awesome information we're sharing and get to know us, then they come to a sales call with us and like, "Oh my god, I feel like I already know you." And then they
mhm.
don't have as many questions for us. They want to say yes. And so then it's a nice conversation because they do already know so much about us because of the podcast.
So it's kinda like you're able to take that, kind of, conference that we you could have a bunch of people going to a conference,
Right.
and they're all like a real estate conference or a sales conference, and they're showing all these different strategies or different types or life coaches will have these, go to these big conventions and they'll talk about these different mentoring strategies. And it's because it's not just that one event.
Right.
You can keep on doing it, and then people get to know you like a radio show host, like
Yeah,
a Howard Stern or something. They get to know you. You get to
exactly.
be like that DJ or that VJ.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's the connection people like. And I think that's makes them more likely to click that link and go
Yes.
to your website. And then
Yeah,
the cool thing about the podcast, if they go to the video ones, they actually have clickable links,
yeah,
that can actually take what they just heard or saw and actually
yeah,
go right to where their services or product are.
yeah,
So I think that's probably a pretty good use of, checking the click rate coming off a podcast versus coming off other things.
yeah.
Seems like that might be proven that it works.
Exactly, exactly. And it can take time, as a marketing tool, podcasting can. It's not a just throw it up, if you build it, they will come type of thing.
Mhm,
But the payoff is great because people really do get to know, like, and trust you, if you're your real self and you're authentic and everything, and you're providing great value, which is what I expect of podcasters. So, it should go without saying. But yeah, so they
Is
you're
it
you're
yeah.
you're creating a community through your podcast of fans that is coming back to listen to you every week, however often you're publishing new episodes or or videos with them as well. And so you are providing all this value for them and they're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been really interesting in terms of like the lead generation. In terms of like, it's like, well, how do you do lead generation when you're an artist? Well, if
Yeah.
you're a book, if you're an author, you get opportunities to get asked to go to conventions. People didn't know about you, and then they say, oh, they were on the podcast. They invite you to the convention. They invite you to the Comic Con. They
Yeah.
invite you, to actually work with other people or cover guys that want to ping this author like what she's doing. Maybe she want to look at my covers. So you get all
Yeah.
kinds of collaborative opportunities
Yeah.
within the music world. Like we get a chance to like guest on other people's albums, feature on be a
Mm.
producer on other people's records. I've had 5 or 6 different opportunities to work
Mm.
on projects from guests I actually got on the program. We didn't know we were going to vibe that well. And then we ended up saying, hey, and then we did additional episodes.
Wow.
I tend to get a lot of the artists to come back 3, 4 times.
Yeah.
And so it just keeps on building this whole like Rolodex of like-minded people, and it's expanded
Yeah.
in multiple areas where, and then we get a film director said, I don't like this musician. Maybe I want to do a music video with him.
Mm.
And then you get people who do all kinds of recording engineer. Oh, I'd like to engineer on this guy's record.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have never talked to each other, but you've kind of opened up the world where now people feel confident to reach out where maybe they on the convention floor they wouldn't. That's what
Mhm.
I've had a couple of conversations. People have said, well, in the podcast world, you sometimes are able to get to people who would not actually talk to you in
Isn't that
real life.
amazing?
Yeah, that's why I find it really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the
So
podcasting community is just so cool that way, and even for people like you're describing who aren't really in the podcasting world until you brought them into it, and then all this
yeah,
magic happens. It's so awesome. I love that. I
who was
love hearing that.
the most surprising guest you ever had that somebody you didn't think you were going to have them
Oh
come on the
gosh.
show?
Oh my gosh. I I've had really cool guests. So at Geek Girl Soup, we had Disha Filia, who is the author of The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. Massive book, came out fall 2021, sorry, 2021. And it is being turned into a series at HBO Max.
That's awesome.
Yes, hoping to have her back when it is coming out on HBO Max. And we've also had an Emmy-winning writer and producer of New Amsterdam and The Mentalist. She's fabulous, Erica Swafford Green. At Podcast Launchpad, I had Justin Schenk on. He is huge in podcasting, Growth Now movement. His podcast is ranked by Inc. magazine as one of the top 8 podcasts every entrepreneur should listen to. And we met up on LinkedIn, and I was on his show, and he came on my show, and it was just fabulous. Yeah. And then I've had on Alex Sanfilippo from Pod Pros, All Things Pod Pros, and he's amazing. Yeah. It's just
Yeah, I gotta
incredible.
get him. I gotta get him
Yeah.
to come on the show.
Yeah.
but
So,
but
yeah, to have these
yeah,
big podcasters on right away when my show is brand new was just like, oh my God, dream come true. So, and Chris Kremitsas from Podfest.
like, oh
Yeah.
wow, oh that's
Yeah.
cool. Um,
Yes. It was awesome.
yeah, I was very surprised when I got 2 Grammy award-winning producers to show up,
Oh.
and I'm not the biggest indie musician ever.
But
I'm
you
kind of an
just got to
underground.
ask. But you
Yeah,
just got
well,
to
I'm an
ask. Isn't that
underground
right?
artist,
Yeah.
and well, the cool thing was that they just dug what I was posting.
Yeah.
They actually, saw the stuff I was posting and they liked it.
Oh,
So that was
that's
kind of like
awesome.
my strategy, like on Instagram, when I see other artists that like my stuff, and then I'd actually saw a couple Grammy Award winning producers, they liked what I was posting.
Yeah.
And then I went and had a direct conversation, and they said, "Yeah, I'll come on the show." I didn't have to go through agents, didn't have to go through managers. Went right
Yeah.
to them, and that has been really cool for me when I've actually been able to get a couple of emerging bands that
Mm.
I really liked, and I thought they were going to get bigger, and they
Yeah.
did.
Ah,
And then they still want to talk to me.
wow.
So I
Beautiful.
think that in itself is like not that I'm a fan person, but as a musician, I think all musicians are fans of other musicians. That
Yeah.
those we have our heroes. We
Yeah.
have the people that we are influenced by, and as a musician, we're always listening to other musicians,
Yeah.
and that's why my whole approach initially was, what if a musician interviewed a musician instead of a journalist?
Mhm.
And I'm gonna come at it from a different perspective. Am I gonna ask him things that a musician would like to ask another musician, not what a journalist would ask a musician? That's been our
Right.
approach. And then I tried to open that up to like everything.
Yeah.
Um, and including, entrepreneurs and people who are other podcasters. And it's just, I think it's interesting that how business has gone into podcasting full bore. When
Mhm.
I first did it, it was like a lot of artists, a lot of people
Mhm.
just doing it for fun. And now
Mhm.
it's become something that's a lot more serious in terms of the economic, structure, and there's more discipline happening with
Right.
people putting together very tight shows.
Yeah.
That I still have this kind of loose radio kind of live format that I still feel that's me. That's how I'm
Mhm.
gonna do it.
Yeah.
I would be fake if I was trying to do something else. But how do you feel about like the whole environment for podcasting? You mentioned this concept of pod fade, and I
Mhm.
think I did have seen that, and that's why I've adjusted what I do. But maybe you can talk about it.
Yeah, so pod fade is when people prematurely quit their podcast because of burnout, overwhelm, they didn't have a plan, and it tends to happen really early in the game. Most podcasters quit before they even get to 10 episodes. It's really around 7. And you'll see a bunch of podcasts out there, 1 episode and nothing
Yeah,
else.
that's interesting
Yeah, it's really
because
sad. So with like the numbers vary. Let's say 4 or 5 million podcasts that you can find on, like, Spotify claims to have more podcasts than Apple Podcasts, fine, whatever. Of the 4 or 5 million that you can find on the app, only around 350 to 400,000 are active, meaning new episodes
all
being
the time.
published
Yeah,
regularly. Yeah, every month, being
yeah. I mean,
published every month. Yeah,
I'm going through 4 or 5 a week.
yep,
But the thing with me that was weird is, like, once I get into something, I just get a habit,
yeah,
and I just kept on doing it, and so I
yeah,
got over 830 episodes, since
awesome,
2016, and it
awesome.
was, people say, "Oh, they only." I remember I was talking. I think Alex sent me something saying, "They only go like 12 months at the max," and I'm like, "Well, I gone beyond that." But but yeah, you'd have too. But it's interesting. 'Cause same thing happens with musicians. Like, I'm a 55-year-old musician out of the '70s. My friends, all my band gave up. I'm still playing. So I
Yeah,
think that's my discipline, just because I never stopped, and I found
yeah,
ways where they thought, "Oh, well, if I'm not gonna make it in 2 years, I'm giving it up," and I never gave up. I
yeah,
just became a producer, and then I could keep on going.
yeah,
And, just because I like it. If you're passionate about it, I didn't really care if I was making money, and sometimes I make money, sometimes I don't. But,
yeah,
like, yeah, I do the art because I love it. I do the podcast because I love it. So I
yeah,
think if people have the wrong expectation about what's gonna happen, it's
right,
just like the musician who thinks they're gonna, "Oh, I'm gonna break, I'm gonna be in the top 10," and they never hit it, then they give up. Versus somebody
right,
that's an indie artist and realizes, "I got 50,000 fans worldwide, that's it." But I know a lot of bands that they just have survived at that. When people say, "Oh, you can't survive at that," and you can. If you understand your audience, you
right,
pitch to you can live within that limit, and you can still work. You
right.
don't have to give up. But,
Exactly.
I think people have to understand, like, where they are.
If all musicians quit because they didn't make it into the top 10 or even the top 100, Billboard or whatever chart you wanna look at.
Yeah, there won't be that many around.
Exactly. There'd be 100. There'd be 100 musicians. That'd be it.
Yeah,
That we don't know. No, that'd be terrible. So, no, we need to keep doing it. And same with podcasters. If we all quit for not making it into the top 10, there would be 10 podcasts per category. Boring. Oh my God.
yeah.
So, no.
But I
And
think
it's
yeah,
not, you can, if you want to make money directly from podcasting, you can do it without being in the top 10. And
definitely.
you can make money from your services by having a podcast. Even if you are not monetizing the podcast with sponsors or ads or whatever, you can still get clients or customers or, fans buying from you through your podcast.
Yeah, I've heard stories of people getting like 30 clients and they get made hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
because of what their services are. So
Right.
it doesn't have to hit 10,000,
Right.
100,000 people. They
Right.
just had to hit the right 30 people and they still did well. And it's like if you're a
Exactly.
musician and you get picked up to work on a video game because somebody
Right.
saw your stuff, you get a big payday. That you might not show up on the top 10 list on Spotify, but you still got paid. You're still a
Right.
working musician, still could
Exactly.
do ads, you could do, film scores, you can do commercials. There's a lot of stuff that needs music.
Yeah.
And so for every band that's in on some kind of ranking, there are
Mhm.
working musicians that actually provide content that's needed everywhere. Like there's so many
Yes.
things that have music and people want music they're not going to get a strike on. They want something
Exactly.
original. You just got
Exactly.
to find a way to get to it. And then being out in the world, people
Mhm.
find out who you are. And
Yeah.
sometimes the right people find out who you are. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, I think it's a good tool for all types of artists, and I've seen like multiple types of artists from playwrights, to actors and film directors, painters,
Yeah.
there's multiple, all the arts are involved in podcasting at a high degree just because of the engagement
Yes.
that you can get
Absolutely.
in the community you can build.
Yeah. You know what I would love? I don't This probably already exists and I just haven't found it. So, most indie podcasters will go to Pixabay Music or Sound Ben Sound, is that it? One
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
the
the different
music places and pay little or nothing to get royalty-free licensed music for their podcast, right? I would love music that only I have that I don't have to pay a huge amount for, and I'd love to
Mhm.
recommend this to people. Because, indie podcasters starting out on a budget, but to be able to buy it from a musician's website and be like, okay, this is now mine, and they're taking it out of their inventory.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
know if
Well,
do
I
you know if
mean,
such a thing exists?
there are companies that pitch our stuff like I'm part of a different collective. Well, I'm part of BMI, like songwriter, and
Yeah.
I'm in like this thing called Vampire, and they license music.
Yeah.
It's an app, and then they go and find licensing opportunities for different groups. So they might I'm in a pool of artists who like I actually BMI licensed a bunch of my work for Twitch. So
Awesome.
gamers were able to get, but I actually got approached by like a marketing company that said, "We wanna put your music you wanna put Peg music on Twitch and license
Nice.
it through BMI." And so
Yeah.
I sometimes you have to go through, like, a couple partners to get to the places that do it, but
Right.
there are companies that are actually pitching, licensed music that specifically can be used for multiple purposes, like, I'm on
Right.
Vampire, other BMI does stuff for me and other
Right.
affiliations. So artists will go and do that,
Right.
like where Vampire is actually using it, how you get to it, I don't know how you get to it because I'm providing my music through
Yeah.
my agent, and then they're putting it
Okay.
out there, and I don't know how you find it.
I'm
I could
I'm
probably
just
ask.
think I'm just thinking about an indie musician putting
Mhm.
something together to sell
Yeah,
their own
that'd be a
tiny
good idea.
compositions, yeah, without going through a middle person. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if it'd be worth
I
it,
think
but,
musicians would love. Yeah, I think they'd love to put that together. I think different
yeah,
collectives, there's all
Mhm.
kinds of electronic music collectives that would love to
Right.
probably put that together. You
Yeah.
could get a bunch of artists, I have a big list of artists, I could even think about trying to build that myself,
Yeah.
because, I don't license everything, and that's
Where the artists could get paid more than they're
yeah,
doing now, but it's still affordable to the indie podcasters, to get not it's not custom, but
mhm.
it's where they're the only ones who would have that music, so it gets taken out of the
Yeah, yeah,
catalog
you
after
can
that.
take it out of the catalog. You can do
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people write, like, I write a lot of instrumental stuff, and I know a lot of
Yeah.
other electronic musicians that we write instrumental pieces that never got published.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times what it is, like, you take your unpublished work, and then you provide it, and so I
Yeah.
have a bunch of stuff that's unpublished that I put into this pool, and then if somebody takes it, then it gets it wasn't even published, but that person now
Right.
has it.
Yeah.
So, that's the kinda thing you would probably wanna think about. Well, I probably even think of talk to some of my colleagues and see
Yeah.
if that's something that we never thought of, like podcasters wanted. We've always talked about, oh, video game guys want it, and
Yeah.
advertising guys want it. I never thought about podcasters that want
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could think about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I think I'm gonna think
Could
about
be cool.
it
Could be cool.
when I can work.
We kinda got off
Yeah.
track there. It's still podcasting and it's music. No, we put it all together.
No, it's a good idea because it's like that's the synergy. Because, like I
Yeah,
said, everything needs music. I do see,
exactly.
like, different platforms like Anchor has the ability that you could just grab music, but sometimes it's not something you really want. Um,
Right.
yeah, so yeah, if you want to be able to customize or get
Mhm.
better source
Right.
of like, musicians, we have places that we can go to Splice, we can go to Fruity Loops, we can grab stuff and we can actually use it in a song. We can
Wow.
go and pay for music and pay for that license so we can actually put it together. I'm the type of music, I write my own stuff, so I don't really do that.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of producers that do in hip hop and EDM that kind of call from what's out there and they take, they have to pay
Yeah,
for
exactly.
use of stuff. And
Yeah.
I'd rather just write it because
Yeah.
I'm a keyboardist, so I can just write
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can understand like people wanting to have like, oh, I want a more atmospheric thing. And maybe it sounds like Enya, or maybe it sounds like that. Because a lot of musicians, we get pitches. So can you do a song that sounds like an Enya this, or it sounds like Burt Bacharach, or it sounds like that, and then we'll go and actually write it.
Wow.
So
That's
we can
awesome.
actually get work. We can get work
Yeah.
for hire where people are looking for something.
Yeah.
And then we need 2 minutes and 30 seconds and we need it to sound like this. And they'll have a description of what they want. It's like a work order.
Yeah.
And we need you to write this. And then you go write it and you get it and you get paid. And
That's
then they own
awesome.
it. And
Right.
so like if we had a marketplace for podcasters that could actually say, well, I kind of want something that sounds like an Elton John song, but it's not an Elton John song, but it has
Right.
this vibe. That's what they want. And so, okay, we could write that.
Cool.
There's
Yeah.
tons of songwriters that could do that, so
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
absolutely. Yeah, and then it's totally unique for that podcast. No one's gonna turn on some other podcast and go, "Wait a minute. I just heard that on this other one."
Unless they
Yeah.
sample it and then we give them a copyright strike.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, they won't play it again.
Yep. Yep.
But, yeah, so, I mean, yeah, that's the way the world is today. A lot of people, like, don't realize, and then they find out.
Yeah.
You can't use licensed music
No, oh my
without
god, I
permission.
talk about that on my podcast, and my group, yeah. You
Some people
cannot
don't know that. They don't know.
I know, I know, like, even if it's a clip that's available on Instagram, you cannot use it in your show, and don't get your neighbor, your family member, a friend to make a song for you without having a written contract, and
Oh, yeah.
pay them and make sure
Yeah,
it's royalty free. Because if your show gets really big one day, you do not want them coming after you and say, "I want royalties."
yeah, they can take them. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what you have to do. Yeah, you have to get releases. Like we get like when we have a musician come on and we actually play their music video, we get a release because we interviewed them, right? So we get releases because we're actually talking about their music. It's not we're trying to
Yeah.
make music. We don't make
Right.
money off of their song.
Right.
We're promoting them.
Right.
So
That's
we're coming in like
promotion and editorial.
area
Yeah, but you're
purposes.
right.
So
You need a
we're
release.
able to do that type of agreement, and that's what we're doing. But if you're
Yeah.
actually trying to use a theme song and you grab, oh, I'm gonna grab Tear the Roof Off from Punkadelic and I just like it. Well, they're gonna come after you
Right.
because you didn't go and ask them for permission to do it, so they're not gonna let you do it. Um,
Yes.
but I
And I
think
know of
part
so
of
many shows that do that.
well, a lot of times they just don't get caught, or they do
I
get caught. I mean,
know.
YouTube usually catches them pretty quick. They'll put the claim right on.
Yeah.
They'll just throw it on,
But when they're
and
audio only, they sneak by.
yeah, I think they can get sneak if you're not on some of the bigger platforms that have the rights management,
Right.
then you're able to kind of get away with it. Is
Yep.
once you get into the video world and you're in the YouTube, Facebook
Yep.
world, they have
Exact.
tools. I'm a musician. I want those tools to be there because I have
Yep.
licensed songs, and I get reports
Yeah.
about people using stuff all the time. I said, well,
That's
I'm getting
cool.
paid,
Right. Right.
but that's the way it is. But that's kind of I think the Napster type of thing. The people
Yeah.
don't realize
Yeah.
that you just can't, take a set and copy something and just like use it.
Yep.
But then people don't, they think they get confused when they see DJs doing it, but they don't
Right.
understand that DJs are actually paying licenses.
Yeah.
Like when you see these EDM DJs and they're taking a lot of songs, they actually are paying for that. They
Oh,
have to pay.
wow.
And so, and they're producers to a certain degree, but they have to pay for the songs they use.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and sometimes if they come on the show, I have a hard time
Mm.
with some of them because they have so many licenses. I can't even have them come on the show because
Oh,
I
wow.
get so many claims on it that are
Yeah.
just like you'll get like Sony saying, "Well, you got to take it down." You
Oh,
get get Columbia saying you got to take this down because we don't have authorization. So that's the only thing about that genre kind of shows you like they didn't write it.
yeah.
So I tend to stick with people who actually write their own stuff.
Yeah. That makes sense. My goodness, I
But
hadn't even considered that.
yeah, it's a different world out there. We always have to do, and then AI is kind of coming into this again. I saw some guy that actually took Eminem's voice and then used it to say he loved techno, and then went and did it on a show. And he didn't have the permission to do it. He actually was using his voice and actually having him say in Eminem's voice through AI stuff he never said. And then you think about that from the artistic point of view. Is that
Right.
really what we would need to use AI for?
No. And it's such a legal gray area right now is my understanding. And,
Yeah,
oh
it's
my
getting to
gosh,
be
just
all
yeah, so much with AI. And all everyone promoting Chat GPT and other AI right now, and I am really precious about my voice, and I love writing, and so I've tested Chat GPT, not extensively, like, I went in there, played, and I've read a lot about it, and I'm not using it for anything for me because, again, I love writing, and I want everything to be in my own voice, you
authentic.
know?
Yeah, it's your own thing. I
Right,
think
and
yeah,
you
I'm
go on.
worried about it. But I'm
Yeah,
worried that people are going to create. I've heard what people want to do, what some people want to do.
yeah,
Want to create like an artificial, like Max Headroom
yeah,
podcast host. They want to
yes,
make an AI DJ. They want to make an AI musician,
yeah,
and then take the actual writer or podcast content creator out of the loop and create these AI things owned by these big mega companies and make tons of money and create like these kind of artificial shows.
yeah,
And I'm like, that's fine if that's what you want to do. I just hope it doesn't end up really doing great because creativity has always been a thing that I'm all about. That's why I got into podcasting. I
yes,
celebrate independent, emerging artists that are tend to write their own material, like
yeah,
singer-songwriters, the
yeah,
classic singer-songwriter type of person, or the person that created their own business. They're still a
yeah,
creative person. The
right,
idea that somebody's gonna just replace all that with AI, I'm like, is not very. And I'm not a technical guy. I'm an IT guy, but I'm not into AI. I
yeah,
build from scratch, so
yeah,
I'm kind of like even programmers are worried about it because they're like, oh, like you don't need us anymore.
right, right. I think my audience wants to hear me, not Max Headroom, or not a vocal Chat GPT. And, people who
Yeah.
do wanna hear that, that's fine, and that's not who I'm out to reach then,
Yeah, I think there's
and
always
same
gonna
with
be
you.
people who want authentic, original voices,
Yep,
original content They
Yeah.
want like a live show, and maybe in the future AI would be able to do a live show, and that's
Right.
fine. That's people are gonna want it, they want to see it. They want to see it. It's gonna happen.
Right.
But it's kind of like with DJs. To me, like what happened is like like I grew up like guys like Jeff Beck and Jimmy
Mhm.
Page, Jimi
Mhm.
Hendrix,
Yep.
people like that. And then people go on stage and it's like, I'm a musician. They're on a CDJ. And I'm like, that's not Jeff Beck. That's not Jimmy Hendrix. That's
Yeah.
not Dwayne Allman. And so that's different taste and that's music to you. But I'd rather go see like a fusion jazz band
Yeah.
or go to New Orleans and see a real jazz band.
Yep.
And that's just a choice. The
Yeah.
people who understand it are. I think there's always going to be a market that somebody knows how to play an instrument, somebody has an authentic voice,
Yes.
somebody's a podcaster, has an authentic idea,
Yep.
and then these other things will happen. People will either deal with it or don't deal with it.
Right. Right. I want real. I want authentic. I want someone who's gonna make a mistake sometimes. Do I want like, I'm waiting for the new Peter Gabriel album to come out,
Yeah,
and
yeah, it's awesome.
yeah, and go see him on his US tour, and, do I necessarily wanna spend that kind of money on his concert tickets and then have him make some big mistake? Of course not. But, his voice is
It's
not
so
what it used to
authentic.
be. It
Yeah, it's
is.
not what it
It's
was. Yeah,
awesome. But, like, if all of a sudden he could reach those high notes that he used to be able to, it's like, that's not real. At his age, no, he
he
can't.
probably
Like,
won't.
I saw him on his, tour, the So tour, but,
So tour.
like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, 10 years ago, though, when he, like, redid it.
He
Not 10
redid
years,
it
it
again.
was
Yeah.
in yeah, 2014, I think it was. Yeah,
Mhm.
and, he couldn't hit some of those notes then. So,
Yeah, but he
9
can't hit
years later,
them
he's
now.
not gonna be able to. And
Well, you
so
tend
if
to tone it down. You
yeah,
tend to, like, you know where you can't reach, so you don't
right,
go there. You tend to bring it
exactly.
down, like Elton John was talking about it, like, he can't
Yeah,
hit stuff on a yellow brick road. He
yeah.
he he actually had this interview, I was watching it really, with Bernie Taupin, and they were saying, like, "Yeah, when I can't even understand how I did hit those notes." He was like,
Yeah,
"I hit these notes, it's like I can't even hit them." It's like,
yeah,
so I had to take it down because I can't. I'll embarrass myself because I can't do it. So
yeah,
that tends to happen as you get older. You just can't hit it.
yeah,
So you change it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you can do things with the multi tracks and all
Mhm.
this stuff you can do where you can have the backing tracks. You can still have some of that stuff come out.
Yeah,
And so you can do vocal tricks where you can have a bunch of layered stuff that's still coming out. You sampled
true.
yourself
Yeah,
from the
true,
70s. You could still have it, but then
true.
you sing at the key that you can handle or
Yeah,
the octave range you can handle. And
yeah,
that's kind of what we do to make a better show. It's about the
yeah,
show, but like
exactly.
the techniques out there that where you can still make it sound amazing, but
Mhm.
like what he'll sing is within the range of what he can do now.
Right.
And there might be some older sampled versions of his voice that might still hit those notes
Yeah,
just so the audience can hear it.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just that, it's not necessarily a trick. I mean, the Who used to use reel to
Right.
reels to do
Yeah,
Bob O'Reilly.
yeah.
In order to get that sequence for the Teenage Wasteland, that was actually running on a reel to reel tape. And the band used to
Wow.
say we hated to have to play to that
Yeah.
because sometimes the tape would break. And then it's like, oh, the tape broke. We'll just go play it on.
Gosh.
but
Wow.
but yeah, yeah. Even a band like the
It's
Who
wild.
tried
Yep,
to use tech.
yep. And yeah, if you rely 100% on the tech and something happens, you're
At
out
least
of
if you're
luck.
Entwistle and Townsend and all those guys, they knew how to play. So they
Yeah,
could just like, "Oh,
exactly.
just forget that one, we'll just go play."
Yeah,
And everybody knows they can play. But, yeah,
yeah.
that's the problem if you actually don't know how to play and your CPU goes
Right.
down, then there's no show.
That happened with my ex-husband was managing a band, this is about 20 years ago now, and, so I'm watching from a different place from him, and I'm waiting for them to start this song, and they're just futzing around. Like, "What on earth? Play the song." And I'm just sitting there. So finally, I go around to check my now ex-husband, and he's like, "Yeah, the thing broke in the keyboard that, and I don't remember all the terminology, but that it had the backing
Probably the
track.
sequencer
Yeah,
probably
thank
broke.
you. Yeah. And so they couldn't play it. Okay, well then do the next song. No, they needed it for everything. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Really?
Yeah, if
Wow.
you're dependent on some of these bands are dependent on their backing tracks so heavy that
Yeah.
they can't just go out like the Almonds and just play it.
Yeah.
Like if you're like
Yeah.
a traditional rock band like a Stones or something, the Black Crowes, they're blues-based band, so they can
Yeah.
always play it. Right?
Yeah.
If you're a jazz-based band, like, you can always play. But if you're totally in the box, then we call it in the box,
Yeah.
you're subject to that box going down.
Yep.
Where like I'm an old school electronic, I play Moogs and Roland live keyboards when I'm not
Yeah.
running sequencers. I can
Yep.
actually play it. If the sun goes down, I'll just play.
Yeah.
I mean, I have sequencers to help me out, but if they go down,
Yeah.
I probably got like 10 of them. So a lot of us, we have backups over the backups over the backups. So if one goes out, I'll use one of those. But if you depend on just one, which some bands today are dependent on one, they just give it too much, they too much faith. And I just
Yeah.
never. I'm a tech person. I never trust tech that much, so I
Yeah.
have backups on my backups. And it's just like, I'm into Murphy's Law. And usually when
Yeah.
you do a show, everything that can go wrong will go wrong. So it's better be prepared.
Absolutely.
But
They finally got this one taken care of, but it took like half an hour. And yeah, it was not
yeah, it's
cool.
a lot of
But
work.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh
like
my
a lot of
goodness.
bands get stuck with that today. Um, yeah, it's like I always tell these guys, like, can you actually play the guitar or the bass or the drum? Can you actually do it? Or actually, are you totally in the box?
Right.
And I'm like, because I really like, I have to deal. That's just me. Um, yeah, that's a going into a sidebar, but yeah, that's the way the world we live in, and
Yep.
I'm always pushed to know how to play. So a lot of the people I come on my show are actually true musicians,
Yeah.
and I would look at other people and say they're producers. Not that they're
Mhm.
not a musician, but there's a
Right.
difference between a producer and a musician.
Yes.
Musician can still play if the computer goes down.
Right. Right. It's
But,
kind of key. Yeah.
so that's the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Musician
been
can
a really
play in
great.
the apocalypse.
Yeah, we'll
Pick
play no
pick
matter
up the
what. They can
guitar or the
always just
piano and yeah.
stick in the guitar. Yeah, yeah, you just jump on a piano and acoustic guitar. I love unplugged stuff.
Yeah.
I had a big like festival a couple of years ago. I had all my podcast guests, show how good they are by just saying like, "Hey, just do an unplugged 30-minute
Mm,
concert from wherever you are," and we called it
mm.
the Bedroom Producer Festival, and people were just playing in their
Nice.
bedroom. And it
Ah,
was kind of just showing you like the true talent that musicians have. They can just go off and just do it. And it was very beautiful to see everybody just do things and without all the elaborate stuff, without
yeah.
all the things you can have. Just play that acoustic guitar or play that piano without anything else. And I think that why people liked Unplugged.
Yeah.
And kind of why I do live podcasts because I
Mhm.
don't necessarily like perfection. I've
Mhm.
always been into happy accidents.
Yeah.
I always tell people,
Absolutely.
like, if you listen to Exile Main Street, that's not the way things are produced today,
Mm.
right? That there are tons of like errors in the recording,
Mhm.
but those errors are what makes the song, the whole, producers wouldn't let them do it today.
Right.
But that
Right.
stuff is like Keith Richards. That's the way he plays, and
Yeah.
so that's what it is, and it's beautiful. And the key changes and the kind of off the cuff, kind of ramshackle stuff, nature of it. And
True.
sometimes it's good to have a little chaos. That's been
Absolutely.
I'm a big purveyor of that.
Totally agree. Love it.
So I love having you on the show. I think we're at kind of at the closing time. We want to let people know that you can click the https forward slash Angela Kelly Smith.com, and you can get everything about you there. Is that what do you offer there?
So, my work is mostly with women entrepreneurs. I will work with other people though, to help them start their own podcast as a marketing tool for their business. So, I do one-on-one work and I have the Women Podcasters Academy, which is a full course and group to help you launch a podcast.
That's awesome. So that will be fully clickable when we're on our partners such as Spotify Video Podcast, and Google Play and Stitcher and all these other places that where you can find us. And thank you again for being on the show. We'll be fully published tomorrow. We've been live on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, but we will be on our other partners through our distribution channels by tomorrow.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you again for being on the show.